I didn't believe the rumors until my front door shook violently at exactly midnight. I'm Alex Morgan, a 27-year-old who worked nights stocking shelves at Walmart, lived paycheck to paycheck, and survived mostly on instant noodles. Before everything went sideways, my biggest worry was dodging calls from debt collectors. Simple, ordinary problems. The kind that eat away at you slowly, not the kind that scream at your door in the dead of night. It started with the army. They sealed off every exit from the city overnight. Razor wire, armed checkpoints, and tanks idling menacingly at intersections. For your safety, the loudspeakers repeated. But safety never looked so much like imprisonment. We all joked nervously at first, tried to downplay it, pretended it was some routine drill. But drills don't typically end with soldiers firing warning shots when someone approaches a barricade. Then the phones went dark. All at once, screens turned blank, calls dropped mid-conversation, texts left unread forever. People started disappearing, quietly, like whispers carried off by the wind. Families woke up missing members, neighbors vanished overnight. When the drones started circling our neighborhood, buzzing low enough to rattle the window panes, we all knew something sinister had taken root. By the third night, the streets had emptied entirely, except for one man. I remember him clearly, pacing down Elm Street, yelling incoherently, his voice carrying a bone-deep panic. His screams pierced the silence, drawing us to our windows. No one went to him, no one stepped outside. We watched helplessly as black armored figures dragged him away into an unmarked van. His cries faded into muffled silence. Nobody slept that night. We started ignoring the curfew on the fourth day. It wasn't a choice. It was survival. My friends, Tyler, a lanky tech nerd with an obsession for conspiracy theories, and Marissa, a nurse whose tough exterior hid the stress fractures forming underneath, decided enough was enough. We covered windows with garbage bags and blankets, destroyed every security camera within reach, and barricaded ourselves inside my cramped apartment. "We can't trust anyone," Tyler kept saying, his voice barely above a whisper, eyes darting toward every shadow. "Especially the soldiers." Marissa taught us basic first aid and survival tactics she'd learned in disaster preparedness classes. Tyler set up makeshift alarm systems from broken glass and fishing line at the windows and doorways. My role was simpler: stay vigilant, stay awake, and listen. But nothing prepared us for the knocking. It started at exactly midnight, 3 deliberate taps on the door. Patient, calculated, almost polite. The knocks were impossibly loud, echoing like gunshots through the stillness. My stomach twisted painfully as adrenaline surged. Tyler signaled silence, pressing a finger to his lips, eyes wide with unspoken dread. "If you hear knocking, do not respond," Marissa whispered urgently, reciting a rule that had spread through frantic whispers among survivors. But rules don't make sense when someone's voice, familiar, desperate, scared, calls out from beyond the barrier. "Alex, please, it's me," came the voice. It was my mother's voice, trembling and frightened. "Impossible," Tyler mouthed. Marissa shook her head, gripping my arm tightly. "Don't answer." My mother had died 3 years earlier in a car crash. I had identified her body myself. Her voice now was identical, unmistakable, pleading softly through the door. "Alex, let me in. It's so cold out here." Tears blurred my vision. Every instinct told me to tear the door open, pull her inside, and wrap her in a protective embrace. But logic held me frozen. Tyler edged closer, mouthing urgently, "It's not her." The knocking intensified, growing louder, faster, angrier. "Alex, open the door!" My mother's voice twisted, turning into something harsh, distorted, monstrous. The door shook violently, hinges screaming under immense pressure. Tyler threw his body against it, struggling to hold it closed. Marissa joined him, bracing her shoulder against the splintering wood. I stood paralyzed, tears streaming down my face as my mother's pleading turned into inhuman howls of rage. Then, abruptly, Silence. We remained pressed against the door for minutes that felt like hours, listening to our own shallow breathing. Finally, Tyler stepped back, pale and shaking. "What was that?" Marissa stared at me, compassion and fear mingling in her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered, "but whatever it is, it knows us." That night, the knocking visited every apartment in the building, moving methodically from door to door. Some neighbors screamed, others stayed silent. By dawn, more people were missing. And as we fortified our apartment further, reinforcing every weakness we could find, the horrifying truth settled over us. The soldiers were never the real threat. It was something much worse, something that wore the voices and faces of those we loved, knocking patiently, waiting for one moment of weakness to let them in. The next night brought no relief, only an oppressive dread that settled deeper into our bones. My apartment became a cage of whispered fears and barely restrained panic. Tyler paced relentlessly, triple-checking locks, reinforcing barricades. Marissa sat quietly, sharpening a kitchen knife against a whetstone, her eyes fixed on nothing. My thoughts raced back to the knocking, to my mother's voice, twisted into something monstrous. Had I imagined it? Number. It was too vivid, too real. Her pleading tone still echoed painfully in my ears. Midnight approached again, each second ticking louder in our heads. Tyler set his traps again, broken glass scattered by the door, cans on strings placed carefully by windows. But the worst part was knowing that none of it would truly stop whatever came knocking. It had nearly broken the door down once already. We sat in suffocating silence, awaiting the inevitable. Then, right on cue, 3 slow, rhythmic knocks shattered the quiet. This time, the voice was Tyler's father. "Son, please, open up. It's your dad." The voice was weary, vulnerable, perfectly matching the man Tyler had buried 4 years ago. Tyler flinched as though struck. "No, Dad's gone." He shook his head violently, covering his ears, trying desperately to drown out the pleading voice. "Tyler, son, it hurts, please." Tyler's composure shattered instantly. He lunged toward the door, overcome by grief and impulse. Marissa and I caught him barely in time, wrestling him away as he fought us wildly, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Let me go," Tyler screamed. "Dad, I'm coming. Dad." The knocking intensified, echoing Tyler's desperation. The door vibrated under a relentless assault. Wood splintered. Hinges creaked ominously. Marissa shouted for me to grab more furniture, anything to barricade the weakening barrier. I shoved a heavy dresser in front of the door as Marissa struggled to restrain Tyler, her arms wrapped tightly around him. "Tyler, listen to me," Marissa shouted. "It's not him. It's not your dad. You know it's not." Tyler's thrashing weakened, collapsing into helpless sobs. Marissa held him close, whispering comfort into his hair as the knocking ceased abruptly, leaving a suffocating silence in its wake. "I'm sorry," Tyler whispered hoarsely, his voice broken and small. It sounded exactly like him. Marissa and I exchanged wary looks. The pattern was undeniable. It targeted us specifically, exploiting our grief, our deepest wounds, and it was relentless. The rest of the night dragged by agonizingly slow. None of us dared to sleep. At sunrise, pale and exhausted, we found the courage to carefully open the curtains just enough to glimpse the street below. The neighborhood was a ghost town. Doors hung open, windows shattered, cars abandoned. Whatever was taking people, whatever was masquerading as our loved ones, it was succeeding. "Alex, look!" Marissa's voice was urgent. I followed her gaze down the street. Standing motionless on the corner was a figure, watching our building. I squinted, my blood freezing. It was my mother, or whatever wore her face. Her head tilted unnaturally to one side, limbs rigid and stiff like a broken marionette. Even from the distance I could see her mouth moving, forming silent words I dreaded to hear. Don't look at it, Tyler snapped, pulling the curtain shut. It knows we're watching. It wants us to see. How do we fight something like that? Marissa asked, her voice trembling, echoing our shared hopelessness. We don't, Tyler answered grimly. We survive. That day, we fortified every inch of the apartment, improvising weapons, rationing food, and whispering plans of escape. But beneath the grim determination lay the unspoken truth. We were running out of time, and none of us truly believed we could outrun the knocking. As darkness fell once again, I found Marissa sitting alone in the kitchen, staring blankly into space. You okay? I asked gently. None of us are, she replied softly, her voice hollow. But we have each other. We hold on to that. I nodded, gripping her hand tightly, feeling the fragile strength in her touch. Then midnight came again, and with it, the knocking returned. 3 measured taps, slow, deliberate, inevitable. And this time, it spoke in Marissa's voice. Marissa's voice carried a chilling echo through the apartment, gentle yet menacingly distorted. Please, Alex, Tyler, it's me. Open up. Let me back in. We both turned to the real Marissa, who stood rooted in place, her face drained of all color. Her eyes widened, reflecting sheer terror. Tyler grabbed her arm, grounding her in the moment. It's not you, he whispered fiercely. You're right here with us. But the knocking persisted, each strike heavier, louder, more insistent. Alex, Tyler, I'm scared. It's so dark out here. Please, let me in. Marissa's twisted voice pleaded from behind the barricade. Marissa shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. Stop it, she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. You're not me. Leave us alone. The knocks transformed into savage blows, each one rattling the furniture stacked against the door. Wood splintered audibly, cracking with each punishing strike. We scrambled, piling everything we had left, tables, chairs, the refrigerator, anything to fortify our makeshift fortress. It's coming in, Tyler shouted, his voice thick with panic. We have to move now. But there was nowhere left to run. My apartment had become our last stand, our sanctuary now a trap. Tyler stood guard at the door, gripping a metal baseball bat. Marissa armed herself with her sharpened knife, eyes wild but determined. My hands shook as I gripped an old crowbar, heart pounding violently in my chest. Suddenly, the assault ceased, plunging us back into an eerie silence. I strained my ears, listening for the slightest movement outside. Seconds stretched into an eternity of silence. Then, without warning, the entire apartment echoed with a symphony of pounding. Every door, every window erupted simultaneously in violent, rhythmic strikes, a relentless cacophony designed to break us. Voices we knew and loved howled from every direction, parents, siblings, friends. They pleaded, begged, cursed, all blending into a monstrous chorus. Alex, why are you doing this? My mother's voice sliced through the chaos, brittle and accusatory. You're letting me suffer. Open the door. Son, you abandoned me again? Tyler's father roared, harsh and bitter. Alex, Tyler, you promised you'd always protect me, the twisted version of Marissa sobbed, her voice full of betrayal. Our resolve shattered under the relentless psychological torment. Tyler sank to his knees, shaking uncontrollably. Marissa collapsed beside him, her weapon slipping from limp fingers. I stood alone, feeling the weight of every voice pressing heavily upon me, threatening to crush my sanity. Then I remembered Marissa's words. We have each other. We hold on to that. I grabbed both their shoulders firmly, shaking them awake from their daze. It's lying, all of it, I shouted over the horrific chorus. We have to stay strong. It feeds off our fear and grief. We can't give in. Tyler stared up at me, eyes haunted, yet flickering with newfound determination. Marissa slowly rose, reclaiming her weapon and gripping it fiercely. We're together, she whispered, a fierce conviction returning to her voice. No matter what happens. With renewed strength, we stood back to back in the center of the room, weapons raised defensively, awaiting whatever came next. The pounding ceased abruptly once again, replaced by a chilling silence. Minutes passed, dragging painfully slow, each heartbeat echoing loudly in my ears. Then a single gentle knock broke the quiet. This time the voice that spoke was mine. "Alex," it murmured softly from the other side of the door, mimicking my own hesitant tone perfectly. "Open up. You can't hide from yourself forever." My skin crawled. My stomach lurched violently. The imitation was flawless, terrifyingly precise. But I stared at the door, defiantly addressing the twisted version of myself. "You're wrong," I called back steadily, fighting the fear clawing at my throat. "We're stronger than you think. You're never getting in." A heavy silence settled over the apartment, broken only by our collective ragged breathing. Eventually the false me spoke again, quieter now, a sinister resignation seeping into its voice. "We'll see about that." Then silence again. This time it felt different. Final, decisive, ominous. We stood guard until dawn broke, exhausted but alive. As daylight filtered cautiously through the gaps in our barricade, I knew the nightmare wasn't over. The city outside lay desolate, twisted beyond recognition, and filled with threats we couldn't yet imagine. But we were together, alive, resilient, unified. The monsters outside might wear familiar faces, speak in familiar voices, but we knew the truth. And as long as we held on to each other, we would survive whatever horrors knocked next. Don't miss the next story. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're first to hear the next emergency warning.